So my book Real Growth is finally out. The culmination of over 200 podcasts with some of the leaders in the industry. It's taken me about 2 years to pull it together. So it is available now. It's on Amazon, so check out the link in my bio and please let me know how you get on with it. It's all designed to really help people through 3 sections of growth, mindset and business. So check it out, let me know what you think. Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Andy Barker, who is physiotherapist and also the new Grad Physio mentor. So Andy, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Very good. Good. Thank you for joining. There does seem to be an incredible amount of Andys in the world of healthcare. I don't know if you've come across that, but there's loads of us.
It's a great name. So bit of the story of my name. So my Andrew, my proper name, was my mum's maiden name. So that's where that came from. Fairly easy pick.
So what, that was her, so she was called Andrew?
Yeah, that was her surname, yeah. So that's where my name came from.
She wanted to retain it. Oh yeah, it's quite good that, isn't it, really? Yeah. You don't get it much anymore, do you? It's not really.
No, not a whole lot, no.
But yeah, I wouldn't have said it was an old-fashioned name, but maybe that's just me thinking it isn't because it's me and that bit as well. So yeah, just like that, normally I start at the start for these things in terms of how you got into doing what you're doing. But I think what you're doing is really interesting because I reflect on what I love about doing these podcasts and speaking to so many great and interesting people is how do we help future people coming through, which is essentially what you're doing in your work. So just talk to me about like what the new Grad Physio is.
So I guess to go all the way back to probably the start of my career, I was really fortunate in sport to have great mentorship. So when I first sort of bounced out of uni, I literally finished my exams and the day after went straight into professional sport, which was fantastic. It's what I wanted to do. And I guess thinking the challenges and how hard that was, I certainly wouldn't have been able to navigate that without the sort of mentors that I had at that particular time. So it's always, even going back then, I think I was aware how hard the environment was, but very sort of thankful and grateful for the support I got at that time. So over the years, I think it sort of happened organically, but I started to help other people, and that was sometimes just people reaching out on like LinkedIn and Twitter, as it was then, just asking for like help, support, and very random and sort of ad hoc type thing. But I really enjoyed doing it first and foremost, and then a bit later in my career I started to do a bit of ad hoc teaching on sports therapy, physio, BSc, master's degrees, and actually really enjoyed the sort of teaching kind of thing. And I think actually it helped me a lot as a clinician, because I think if you can try and teach someone, or in my head anyway, to have to teach someone something, you have to sort of know it fairly well yourself. So it was certainly helping me with that side of things, and I guess in terms of the evidence base and learning things to try and not only teach other people but also help myself in my own sort of practice. So it sort of, I guess, that happened organically over time, and then back in 2018 now, I sort of set up like a sort of formal teaching platform to help new grads really, and the aim of it is to, I guess, to help that transition between university and the real world, because I think it's a thankless task that university staff have, not just on physio degrees but like sports therapy, sports rehab, to, I guess, to equip therapists with the knowledge and skills to be able to survive in the real world, because it is really challenging. And even a physio degree with 1,000 hours of clinical practice, and basically in university full time over the 3 years, there's always going to be shortfalls, and I think it's just trying to bridge that gap and help therapists so they can maybe not just feel like they're surviving as a new grad, but actually like thriving as a new grad.
Yeah, and I think that's it's really interesting and topical point. So I saw Reese Carter did a post earlier today, because when I interviewed him, we were talking about recruitment, and they're expanding fast with the way that they're doing it. And I think there's been a lot of it in the past, which was right. Well, you go through NHS, and that's the pathway. Whereas now there's not always those options. So how you prepare people to go into sport, private, whatever it is, as an employee doing your own thing, is massively pivotal. And what he was talking about was they're looking for those character traits rather than the clinical traits, because that can be taught on the job, or can be done through CPD. So what do you like, what's your view on that, and like what do you see as the things that you can help with for the students maybe need more polishing on, or learning on?
Yeah, so I think there's two categories. So a lot of the sort of one-to-one mentorship I do in the new grad physio is probably a 30-70 split in terms of like clinical and actually career support in terms of the sort of the mentorship side of things. So like most of the content in there is actually clinical based. So it's maybe just looking at things in probably a different way. To be perfectly honest, it's probably fine tuning a lot of what the therapists already know. And I think I know you might have seen this yourself when we get a little bit older. I think we all sort of go sort of full circle, and I think when we first qualify and new grads are quite bad for this, and I certainly was. We go chasing, I guess, those magic bullets of it's that treatment technique or this protocol to use to fix every patient or athlete. And I think you get to the point where you realise that some of that stuff's helpful, and it certainly helped me along the way. And you change the way you do things in assess and treat and rehab. But I honestly think that like basic things done brilliantly in any domain is going to help with majority of people. So if 10 patients come through my private clinic, I think being able to do the brilliant basics is going to help 9 out of 10 of those patients. Some of those really complex patients, you might need those really higher end skills. But for the majority, it's the basic thing. So it's probably just helping new grads to understand that and not necessarily steer them away from those magic bullet techniques and all those kind of things, but helping them to try and understand like how it all fits together as like a system, as I'd call it. It's all well and good, I guess, learning from an expert in the shoulder and the knee and the back, but what often they'll teach you is completely different way to assess the shoulder to the knee to the back, and you end up with, particularly for a new grad, all these different conflicting sometimes ways to do things, and then they get a bit confused, and it's almost like they struggle to actually apply the knowledge they've got, which is good in their head, but to the person sort of in front of them in the clinic. So I think it's just fine tuning what they already know, and then just layering on some basic things to start with, just so they can help 9 out of 10 patients. There's always going to be those patients as a new grad that they are really going to struggle with because they are really complex, and even experienced therapists struggle with those patients. So it's just trying to, I guess, nail the brilliant basics, and then depending upon what they need is giving them that support. Because again, I think that's a big thing, and certainly something that I've learned from mistakes and been quite costly in terms of some of the training CP that I've certainly done early in my career, is whereas we often just chase CPD to tick a box to get a certificate, and because everyone else is doing it, whereas CPD should be trying to fix an actual problem you're having. So you have to obviously understand what that problem is first, and sometimes, particularly as a new grad, you maybe don't know, and you need someone to look from take that sort of bird's eye view to see, I can see where you're going wrong here, and you probably need some CPD on your subjective, or it might be on special testing for a particular joint, but not necessarily, you don't need to go and spend, up to upwards of £1,000 on this particular course to learn all about the knee or the shoulder. And it's just really getting really clear on, I guess, identifying what's going to, I guess, move the needle the most for them at that particular time.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And like, I suppose it's like, how open are people to coming and doing this stuff? Because essentially it is asking for help. It's saying, look, I don't feel ready, I'm not good enough. How do people get in touch with you or find out about you?
So it is quite interesting because often, if I was to say that people that I end up sort of working with and mentoring will often touch base about something, have a question, and then I'll offer some advice, support, etc. And then often you don't hear about it for a while, and then it might be a few months or even like a year or two down the track, and then they often will come back and they're probably still having the same issues, and they've probably done exactly what I spoke about then. and tried to go on X course or do, this, that, and the other, learn all these new skills, and they're still struggling to put it all together in real life. That's commonly what happens. I think people are probably more openly talking around the struggles with certain things, particularly from a career side of things. Everyone's obviously clearly aware, like here in the UK, there's issues with people qualifying and just not being able to get employment. So I think it is, people are obviously talking about those kind of things. So it is obviously out there in the domain, and obviously with social media, etc., people will see more of it. So I think people are more aware of it, but I don't think that necessarily means they take action to try and do that. Sometimes people are I guess the easiest things to jump on the bandwagon and sometimes complain about it, but ultimately that for most people is not going to help them achieve whatever it is they want to achieve. If that's finding a job, it's all well and good, I don't know, sign a petition to say they should release loads more jobs, but that's probably not going to happen. If you look at some of the obviously the financial constraints and budgets around the government and stuff, like they're not just going to create 10,000 physio jobs tomorrow, which would be great. And I understand, obviously there's a lot of data showing that we need more physios in certain domains, which is pretty clear cut and obviously makes sense, but there's probably just not the resources to do that. So I think people are more aware, but I don't think that necessarily always means they take action.
Yeah, and so what is the medium? What's the format that you do this? Then I know you do webinars and so on, but like, what is the format for it?
So in terms of media, there's quite a lot of different stuff. There's sort of pre-recorded like videos, assessment, treatment, rehab kind of things, cheat sheet, PDFs, quizzes. There is sort of short and long form webinars. There's some like courses in there, very different lengths, like short and longer form ones. And then they'll also get access to like a private members group, which is really like a platform to be more in the clinic. So again, if you were having a problem with a patient you'd seen today, you could put the patients obviously without the patient name, details, etc. But the patient you've seen, the problem you've had, or where you're a bit stuck, and then like myself and the other guys that are in there, the members can offer support. So it's, I guess, a method to give people help when they sort of need it. And then I guess a third arm to it, if you've got the content, the community, if you like, and then the other part's the mentorship. So some people don't feel like they need to engage with that and don't need to jump on a call like this or a phone call for help and support. Some people will use that a lot more. And like probably I said before, it's probably a 30-70 split in terms of it's often more career support they're after and what to do next, as opposed to sort of clinical support.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I can imagine that peer-to-peer support from a community perspective is really helpful, because people feeling they're all in the same boat, and they've got people are asking similar questions, which sometimes people can be maybe afraid to ask stuff that they don't want to be seen to be not knowing things.
Yeah, 100%. It's like I say, a safe space to do exactly that. Ask questions, and like a lot of forums like that, you'll get certain therapists who will openly just tell you everything, every problem, challenge they're having, and some that will tell me privately by email or on a phone call, video call, but wouldn't openly maybe do that in even that small forum. But I find if like, because the therapists are generally at a similar sort of stage of their career, by answering one person's question, it's probably a problem or challenge that other therapists are probably having around that sort of similar sort of time point, or certainly one they've maybe had before, or might have sort of coming around the corner. They're just not maybe aware of it at that particular time.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. And then so in terms of, like you mentioned at the start, that you got into it because you felt supported. Like going back even further than that, what made you want to get involved in healthcare?
So when I grew up, I actually wanted to be a fireman. So I'm not sure how I ended up as I do know how I ended up as a physio, but I've always been like in around sport and like enjoyed sport. Played a lot of football and rugby when I was younger, and then it was sort of fairly into like training. My best friend through sort of school was really into football. Actually became a professional footballer, but we used to train a lot together and got into the gym quite early. think we lied about how old we were, so we'd go to join the gym and all that kind of thing. But we used to train like all the time, and I got interested in that side of things. And then I was thinking about this earlier because I thought you might ask me this, and I don't think I ever had a plan. Or as a kid, I've got 3 boys now, and the 2 of 10, 7 and nearly 2. And the 2 eldest are mad into sport, rugby and football, and their dream, and one of them at the moment wants to be the next Marcus Smith, England fly half. The other one's his idol's Phil Foden, so he's going to be the next Man City player, which is hard to say as a Leeds United fan, and what have you. But I think growing up, as mad as I was into sport, I never thought or wanted to be like a professional like rugby player, for example. And I'm not sure why not, because a lot of kids do, don't, who are obviously into sport. But I used to go and watch a lot of rugby and watch the Leeds Rhinos with my dad. I remember going to all the games. It's probably one of my earliest sort of childhood memories. And I think got to a point, like I went through school, college, I did like sixth form, did like sport and PE, and did economics and then maths. So that probably tells you in itself, I didn't really know what I really wanted to do. My dad's a builder, so I've been brought up around like building sites and worked on building sites since being 6 years old. And I went through a spell of telling him I wanted to be a builder, and he sort of like steered me away from it a little bit, just saying it's quite a hard career, both like obviously manual labor, etc. So that sort of got squashed quite early. But I always remember going to a game when I was probably about 18, and still at probably that point didn't really know what I wanted to do, and seeing this guy in an orange t-shirt run on the pitch, and I didn't know who he was. And then I sort of somehow worked out that he was the physio. So then I probably like a penny drop moment that I realized you could like work in sport but not be an athlete. And it was sort of then that was probably like the light bulb moment of, oh, that could actually be something, because I was at that point maybe going more down the like economics, maths sort of route. I got decent grades and things, and looking at that maybe as a career in university. But then actually realised you could get a job like I say in sport but not be an athlete, and then it just made me like sort of investigate that side of things. So then that's when I sort of applied to go and study physio.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, it is interesting. Like they are quite interesting A levels, aren't they? Like they're very quite academic ones, aren't they? Like economics and maths are always known as being quite well difficult
Yeah.
difficult A levels. So have you found like how have those particular choices of subjects helped with the work?
Well, I think I'm very like left brain, so I'm very like logical and quite systematic. So that's probably why I went down. Probably why those things enticed me, I guess, a little bit, particularly the maths and the physics side of things, and yes, even the economic side of things as well. So that's probably why those I was probably attracted to those things. So I think that they do feed into that sort of like logical process sort of driven, which is certainly definitely me. But I think if like we think about physio, it's a science, isn't it? So that's ultimately what we do, trying to solve a problem, identify what the problem is, and then try and fix it in the same way you would do, I guess, with some sort of physics equation or maths formula, I guess.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued. I know you're probably going back a few years for when you did it, but like economics, all I know was a few of my mates did it. It was one of the hardest ones for people to do. But like, what do they actually teach you on economics?
That's the one that I dropped at AS level because I didn't probably enjoy it as much. But I remember there was sort of like more the macro, like global type of like markets, and obviously we're fairly dumbed down, I guess, but like how they work, and then more on a micro level in terms of like the UK economy and various bits and sort of pieces, really, from what I remember, which is not a whole lot.
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in that one. So, like, when you were going to do physio, then where did you go and study?
Well, it actually took me 3 goes to get on a course. So I actually had the grades, but just at the time, so it's going back to 2005, so quite a long time ago. It was just that competitive to get on a degree. It was a time when it was, I think, £3,000 tuition fees, which the NHS paid, and then you still got to decent bursary. I can't remember if it was means tested or not. I can't remember, but it was a really attractive degree with also not a lot of places. So I first applied, had the grades. I actually had better grades for some of the places and just didn't get on a course. I went to Australia for a year to play rugby predominantly, but do a bit of working and travel. And then whilst I was away, I reapplied and then didn't. Same thing happened again. Just basically, I investigated a bit further this time, and I'm like two of the unis I'd got through to the last, I think, 200, and I think they invited 100 or so for interview, and it was literally just press the button, random allocation. I was just unfortunate, I guess, in that respect. So I actually enrolled on a different degree at what was then Leeds Met, which is now Leeds Beckett, sports performance coaching, which in hindsight was a great thing because we covered biomechanics, strength and conditioning, did a little bit of basic anatomy stuff, coaching, as in like coaching methods, how to coach, which I think was really helpful in terms of like communication with athletes, players, patients, other people. But I got sort of 2 years through that, and it was still like the physio sort of thing that I wanted to do. So I ended up basically finishing that degree, applying for a third time, and then third time lucky got on a physio degree. So I'd basically did back-to-back BScs plus a year in Australia, which obviously pushed things back a little bit further than probably envisaged at the start. But I think that other degree in particular, and like I mentioned about the coaching, the S&C, some of the other stuff I actually did, was probably a blessing in disguise. And I think also the fact that I'd been away for a year traveling, enjoying myself, and then had that other degree where I sort of lived the university lifestyle and that kind of thing, it meant when I actually did get on the physio degree, because it'd been that long in waiting and it'd been that difficult to sort of get on the degree. It just meant like once I'd got on it, I was like, I need to make the most of this, and it was just sort of head down, just on the degree really. I didn't really, not say I didn't engage with like nights out and things like that, but I'd sort of already done all that sort of thing, so it was less important for me. That I'd moved back home, so I was commuting from mum and dad's house in Leeds and studied my physio degree in Bradford. But I was like getting to uni, like partly to dodge the traffic, but like I was getting to uni like an hour and a half early every single day, just sat in the library, working hard. I stay a bit later, again, partly to dodge the traffic, but then going home. And it was just, looking back, I was conscious that at that time it was still a pretty tough job market, maybe not quite as it is now, but I just thought I need to try and learn as much as I can, get the most out of this degree as I can, so when I do qualify, I'm in a really good spot to try and get a job.
Yeah. And so did you have an aspiration as to what that role was going to be?
Yeah, so I think going back to that sort of penny drop light bulb on the pitch rugby physio thing, I knew straight away, like I knew straight away. I thought like working in sport, and particularly in rugby and rugby leagues, what I was brought up around was what I wanted to do. So my dream job from day one was becoming the head physio at some point at the Leeds Rhinos. But I thought that I don't think you ever really truly know like what it is you want to do until you've maybe experienced it a little bit and seen what it's actually like. But I was fortunate during my training. I did an elective placement at the Rhinos, and then from being there for half an hour, I knew like 100% this was exactly what I wanted to do and the sort of environment I wanted to sort of be in. So that was obviously great, because it sort of allowed me to test drive that environment and sort of confirm that was what I wanted to do and go after. Because you alluded to before when we were chatting just around that more traditional model and around that time everyone was sort of graduating, generally doing their NHS rotations, and then some people would stay in that environment and some would maybe transition into private practice or sport. Whereas at that point it sort of rubber stamped to me, like I thought sport was the thing what I wanted to do, and having done that it 100% was, and it just sort of then opened my eyes a little bit as well, because one of the guys who was there who was actually my educator. I think I was his first ever student, was David O'Sullivan, which I'm sure you've maybe heard of his name. He was one of those guys who was fantastic for me as a mentor. But he would have been maybe a couple of years ahead of me at that particular time in his career, and he was working in sport and doing like basically the job that I wanted to do. And he's the same age as me, but he qualified a couple of years earlier. And I think I remember being told at uni, like with a job, like I think I was chatting to one of the lecturers once, and we got chatting. She was sort of into sport, and just sort of like I think she basically asked me like, what you want to do? And I was like, I'd love one day to be like the head physio at the Rhinos. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but she basically said like a job like that, you probably need to be like 10 years experienced. Yeah, I'd got into that environment and seen this guy who was like 18 months, 2 years ahead of me, and he was doing it. So I was like, oh well, that's not quite right. And I like probed and questioned him around it, and like he was like, yeah, I literally just finished uni and then came straight into sport. So then I realized that was a thing, that people could do that, which again probably lit a fire in me even more so to like, yeah. So I knew sort of where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, and then I guess I saw someone else who'd already done that, which again was really helpful for me anyway, to see that it was achievable and a lot sooner maybe than I initially anticipated.
Yeah. Was that the base that flooded all the time?
Oh yeah, it flooded.
Is it Kirkstall or Kirklees?
Kirkstall, yeah. So it's like
Kirkstall.
yeah, in Leeds. So when we had some really, well, it flooded occasionally, not bad, but flooded really bad it was Boxing Day of 2015. So my actual room where I used most of the time was like the corner closest to the river, and the water got up to about 4 foot high in that room. So the whole place got condemned, and we didn't have a training ground from like Boxing Day, yeah, December 2015 till I think June 2016, which made life quite difficult, just like moving around and training and what have you. But yeah, it was a good complex, yeah. And
it was a really cool complex, wasn't it? It was like one of the more intriguing ones, where I think you shared it with Carnegie at the time. Was that right?
Yeah.
And it was like all little rooms. It was like quite random, but really quite an interesting environment.
Yeah, it was unique, I think, in that sense. When I first started, Carnegie were actually they were in the Premiership then. But we shared the same sort of training facility, shared the same gym. The treatment rooms were sort of like side by side, you know, the rugby union guys and rugby league guys, which was great. It was great for us. Great for me, particularly initially, because we do a lot of like joint CPD stuff together, a lot of like trauma training in house, and there was obviously a double the staff team, because there was obviously 2 teams there, which was great.
Yeah. And did you bounce ideas off each other then as medical staff?
Yeah, we do, like, yes, I say a lot of the joint CPD will be led like in house with problems, queries, questions, but we would speak to each other. The system sort of changed a little bit, which is partly how I got involved with the Rhinos, where another physio, Myron Jones. So he's rugby background, went over to Australia, AFL and rugby league, and then now is in football at Chelsea now. So he went up to be like sort of head of medical and oversaw both clubs, which sort of then meant Dave O'Sullivan moved up and created a role for myself to sort of move into. But it was good. It was like a really, while separate and the different sports and different calendars, because we played summer, they sort of followed the football season and played more winter. There was a lot of crossover and a lot of communication and troubleshooting between the 2 medical teams.
Yeah, I mean, those two, like Merriam's done an amazing job. Like he came to our office. We had a round table of some other top clinicians in last summer, and he's very well respected at Chelsea now. I know he's doing a great job there. And the same with Dave O'Sullivan. Like his stuff's really interesting. The route he's gone down, similar stuff to I guess what you're doing to some extent on it. So really interesting staff, and also like the Leeds Rhino team around that time. You had some big characters that are still prominent now. And like you think that Jamie Jones Buchanan, like I've come across him in his company, and we've used Ram Film for some of our stuff. But what an interesting guy he is! Like very don't know what I was expecting, but I went out a meeting with him. But I just loved chatting to him. Like really thoughtful, philosophical. I don't know what the like sort of spiritual, all of those
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Yeah, he's not probably what you quite expect from a rugby league player.
No, a big
But he's,
unit, like an absolute
yeah,
unit, but then
he's,
also so thoughtful with the way that he approached things.
yeah, and it's like no surprise now he's the like a CEO at the Rhinos, so he's sort of heading up the whole club. He's come from being, coming through the ranks as an academy player, playing 20 years in the first team, and then coaching, working, in the background in the sort of club, and now as sort of chief executive, like CEO, which is no surprise given what he's like. He's a fantastic character. He was an absolute nightmare to look after, in the sense that he would just, like, whatever you asked him to do, he'd do it just at 100 miles an hour. So like when he had some big injuries during his career. He had a quad tendon rupture, which at the stage of his career and what had gone on with his knees previously could potentially have been a career ender for him. And his rehab actually went really well, but there was times in that where I was really having to pull the reins on him, because obviously I didn't want to break him, particularly during the rehab process. And given, if we'd have got that wrong, that could have been curtains for him. But like I say, on the other hand of that, that's the sort of people you want to work with, who, he'll do everything you ask for them. He'd be the kind of guy who would be in my room the day before, like saying, "Oh, we've done X, Y, Z today. Like, what's the plan tomorrow?" He'd want me to send him, like, I think his quad tendon rupture was, Ethan got back in like 7 months, but he wanted, like, I think initially it was like a 9-month plan, like, when am I going to play type thing. I was like, I can't really give you that much detail right now. You had the operation yesterday, but he'd be like that, like knocking the door down, asking you what's next, what else extra could he do. Right, you've told me I can't do that, but what can I do? Which, at times was challenging when there's certain things, obviously he couldn't do. But yeah, it's certainly, with working with players like that, certainly I think makes you look at injuries a little bit differently. And I think he's a good example of, like, finding ways around problems. And again, yeah, yes, clear there's things at certain points in, say, a rehab process you have to stay clear of and modify, or omit at certain times. But there's certainly sometimes a lot more you can do. And it's just working around that injury, working with other staff, the S&C guys, coaches, etc., to I guess fulfill him and give him as much as we could of what he needs, obviously without stalling his sort of rehab progress. But he was, he was a great guy. I had a good story with him when might have been the same injury, where he was probably the last player I ever did any, like, proper, like, contact work with. So he must have been fairly on with his rehab. And I remember we were in the gym at Kirkstall, and it was just me and him there. It must have been fairly late on in the afternoon, and I was getting him to do some, like, conditioning. He was, like, running up and down, like, the track inside the gym. So he was, like, getting up and down. He was absolutely gassed. And then we'd come into, like, the bottom of the gym where there were some mats on our knees, like, wrestling. And I was still playing rugby league at that time. Like, he was at the time probably 15 kilos heavier than me, but he was coming into each sort of rep and he was, like, pretty fatigued and gassed. So it was a bit of a challenge. So it was fairly even. And we were having a bit of wrestle, like, wrestling each other and this, that, and the other. And we've done this a few times. I think just because he was that goosed, he ran up the other end of the gym, and then obviously he was running down the other end, get on our knees and wrestle. On this particular one, I was waiting for him on my knees, and he just ran at me, like, didn't stop, and just, like, absolutely just, he whacked me straight in the neck. I think neck/chest, and it was that you think he winded me. I could hardly breathe. He pinned me to the floor and he was just wrestling me. He thought he was going to choke me out. I was like, Jonesy, what are you doing? You're going to kill me. He's like, oh, sorry, mate. But he was that kind of guy. I think after that, I actually got, we talked about Ben Harper before. I actually got him involved, so we had to, like, basically double team him, because it was just, it was getting to the point where it was probably a bit dangerous on my part. So I think he was the last player that I probably truly did anything of that sort of ilk. And I was getting a bit older then as well, and, like, about to retire. So I thought, I think I've had my day with this now. But that probably sums Jamie Jones up in a little story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting like that, because sportsmen often get painted as, oh yeah, they're just physical specimens. That's what they're there to do. Whereas you kind of meet, you just think, wow, these people are actually, you've got to have a certain level of intelligence and aptitude to get to the top of anything. And so, like in terms of your learning, like you mentioned a few things from being pushed and challenged by Jamie in that instance. But like, what other things do you think you've learned from working at such a high level of sport?
I'd say my probably biggest challenge and thing that I learned earlier in my career, because I was sort of thrust and had quite a really rapid rise in my career, so going from like joining sports straight away from uni, and then within just over a year after that, both Myron Jones and Dave O'Sullivan actually left to go and do different things. And so I ended up actually progressing and being promoted to be the head physio, which was great. It happened a lot sooner in my career. That's obviously was my dream job and thing I wanted to do. So that was obviously fantastic and something I was obviously very grateful for. And look back with obviously really fond memories, and the team during that period I was there were really successful on the pitch and off the pitch as well, which was great. But I think the thing that I most challenged or was most challenged with and really struggled with was managing other people. And I think most of the probably challenges that I've had throughout the course of my career have generally been people problems, not people challenges. And that probably initially in sport was managing other people, because I was sort of thrust into this head physio role, and I was still trying to figure out how I worked and how I wanted to be, be a physio, and how I wanted to assess and treat and rehab and those sort of systems. Whereas then I had other people. I had an assistant physio I needed to like mentor and teach and help along the way. Then there was soft tissue therapists and then doctors to manage, and then all the other like clinical governance stuff, and probably the hardest thing was those conversations with, say, like a head coach about players, about timeframes and prognosis, and those difficult conversations with players, which typically would prior to me taking that role were the head physio. So you still be privy to those kind of things, but it wasn't necessarily you putting your neck on the line sometimes, which is something I found really hard. And I think certainly in terms of managing other people, it's something I got completely wrong in many respects. And I think it probably feeds into me being maybe a bit of a control freak, but I just tried to take too much on myself, which I got away with, I think, because I was young. I didn't, outside of work, I didn't have a lot going on. I didn't have kids or anything at that point. So I probably had more time to do all the other stuff that I probably didn't need to do, and I was probably micromanaging. I was micromanaging a lot of stuff that I didn't need to do. And I think on reflection, I won't say I regret doing it, because I was doing it for what I thought was the right reasons, and because I've been thrust into this job, there was a few like question marks. This is really early in your career. Are you going to be cut out for it? Not necessarily from the players. I was really supported by like some of the senior players, to the point where they when they got wind of the guys who were leaving, were saying like, you need to go for this job, like you can do it type thing, which obviously filled me with a lot of like it filled me with I guess the confidence to go for the role in many respects. But I just needed it to go well, because I was like, if it doesn't go well, particularly on the medical side of things, like this like dream job for me could be cut short pretty quickly. So I did micromanage and do a lot of stuff, which I probably learned. The first 12 months were probably a massive learning curve for me. We had a really successful season like on the pitch, which massively helped, which took like a lot of pressure off some of the challenges happening behind the scenes. Like we won the Super League again, and the start of the year we won the World Club Challenge. Got to the final of the Challenge Cup, albeit got beat. So we had a successful season, which I think helped out a lot. If we had had a unsuccessful season, I think it might have could have gone a different way. But that's certainly one of the things. Yeah, I certainly really struggled with early on. But I think even now, like with the physio clinic and managing other staff, you still make mistakes and still learning. Like I say, I think a lot of problems tend to be people problems in some respects, and sometimes that's communicating. That's sometimes not assuming certain things. I know sometimes I've made the mistake even recently in clinical practice, assuming that I taught a way of doing something to one of the physios in a way that I understood, but they didn't. And that was more like an administrative type of task type thing, so not a clinical thing. But yeah, certainly just trying to navigate that sort of people thing is something, yeah, that's probably a continued challenge, but certainly probably the biggest challenge that I've certainly had throughout my career.
Yeah, and like I was chatting with the previous podcast, who was someone that worked in elite football for a while, and what he said was that he felt in sport it was very difficult to say I don't know or I'm unsure on that. Like, what's your experience of that?
Yeah, I think there's probably some context around that. So I actually think so. The sport's probably a bit different. So I think in rugby, particularly the players would almost respect you being honest. And I certainly, particularly like in rugby league, where I spent the first sort of 10 years of my career, I don't know whether it's the background, the demographic of the players, or whatever else, or the sport itself, just what it's like, but almost I learned quite quickly that the players would almost rather you say I don't know than try and like fluff them up and tell them something that turned then to be untrue. But that said, like you might have a conversation with a player with an injury. It's like it looks like this, but to be honest, I'm not quite sure, and they'd appreciate that. It might be we'll sit on this, we'll have a look tomorrow, and when you come through again, if it's still looking like this, we'll sort out an MRI, etc. Whereas a conversation you'd have for the same injury with the head coach would be very different. Like you wouldn't necessarily go to them and say, "Well, Andy, what's going on?" and be like, "I don't really know," because that probably not going to go down too well. So I think there is some context around that, and I think my experiences then in other sports, like even rugby union and football, have been very different. Where there's, even from a player's point of view, there's definitely more onus of having more answers, which are particularly acutely can be so hard sometimes. But yeah, I think there is some context around. But to what you said around like your previous guest, yeah, I think certainly in sport, you put under a lot of pressure, particularly around like what something is and a diagnosis, and particularly a time frame. That's what ultimately what everyone wants to know. And sometimes, the injury just happened. It's half time of a game, or the changing room after a game, and the head coach, the media man, the press someone else guy or whatever wants to know all these things, which at that particular time when something's just happened can sometimes be almost an impossible task. So yeah, I think it certainly does put you in the spotlight, I think, and can be difficult sometimes to come up with that information, particularly more acutely.
Yeah, and so like long career in rugby. Like, what made you want to transition? And like, I think it's great that you've gone on to do this in terms of the mentoring bit, but setting up a business, creating something new, going out of as much full-time clinical practice. It's a big thing setting up a business and doing that. So what was the instigator for doing that?
Yeah, so probably around like 2015. So at the Rhinos, we had a great in 2015. We won the domestic treble. So like on the pitch was like a fantastic year. We won every trophy available, and that sort of marks the end of an era for quite a lot of senior players who were leaving, retiring, a few staff as well. Sort of, there was a bit of a change of the guard type of time at the club. Not that at the end of that season I thought we've won all these trophies. It's been great. I'm ready to do something different. It wasn't quite like that. I probably started to think at that time I was maybe ready to do something else, but I honestly didn't know what that was. So that was, I guess, probably 2015. Just organically the year after, an ex-player and a current player at the time actually set up a gym literally 5 minutes down the road from where we were based with the Rhinos, and they asked if we wanted to set up a physio clinic. So we ended up setting up a clinic in 2016. I just started, I think, my master's degree in biomechanics that year as well. My first eldest son, who was now 10, had just been born. There's quite a few different things sort of going on at that time. And yeah, I think I was sort of think I knew I was ready for something different, more of a different challenge, I think. And I think in part because the team had been so successful, I felt like it was probably a good time to sort of step away. Albeit you mentioned the floods of 2015 before, so 2016 was a really difficult season. We'd gone from treble winners to nearly getting relegated on the pitch, like all the stuff around the training ground, and our lead, who was the head of medical at the time, a guy called John Power, really good guy. He actually left in 2016 as well, which he was a massive loss to the medical team. He was overseeing still the sort of Carnegie and the Rhinos. I actually had a couple of, I won't say what they were, but job offers in different sports actually in 2016 to move away, and they were attractive. One was overseas. It all sounded great on paper, but I just didn't want to leave during that season because it had been such a poor season, probably on and off the pitch with all the stuff going on. I almost felt like if I did, I went quite far on with one of the jobs in terms of speaking to them and interviewing and stuff, but I pulled the pin because I honestly felt like I'd be jumping ship, and because the club meant a lot to me in terms of it was like my city team. It's the job I always wanted to do. I don't know, there's something like drawing me back in that stopped me from leaving. I would have felt like I was like leaving in the lurch a bit, so I stalled on that. But I think that maybe heightened my maybe need or desire at that time to know that I am ready for something different. But I still didn't know what that was, and it took probably another 18 months until I actually saw a job advertised at the FA, which was like a consultant physio post. And because we'd started to build up the clinic, I was coming to the end of the master's degree. That seemed to work quite well. My initial plan was move out of full-time sport, do the consultancy work, obviously try and then push the clinic. So that was sort of 2018, and that was when I actually started the new Grad Physio as well. So we'd sort of set all that up, which was 6 months of quite a lot of work, just putting together a lot of the content, and it's changed obviously a lot since then, but there's a few different things going on. But I think I initially accepted a role at the FA, which was something like 20 days a year, so not a lot at all. And the idea was to jump predominantly into the private clinic, but I think I ended up doing like 100 days that season. Obviously a lot more than I anticipated, but it still worked well, and I really enjoyed it. It was very different. The majority of stuff I've done at the FA was actually on the women's pathway, so I'd gone from like rugby to football, and gone from men's senior to like women's academy age players, which was completely different. But I really enjoyed it. Not like almost being like not necessarily novice, but like it all being quite novel to me and being very different. And the FA is a great organisation to work for. And I'm still sort of in that sort of role now as a consultant sort of physio. Joined in 2018, and then I'm still sort of doing that sort of role to this day.
That's really interesting then. Like, how's it been setting up a business? Like just the challenges of that.
So like initially, probably the first probably couple of years while I was still in full-time sport, it was only ever like a sort of side hustle alongside myself and business partner, who were both working sort of full-time, and it was where it was located. We were literally finishing at the Rhinos and then going seeing the odd patient here and there. But then obviously when it was coming closer, it was generally built up over time, really organically without really pushing it. And I think because we had in that, not that area per se, but at the time we were both working in sort of professional sport, like the majority of patients who were coming through were like either associated with the club or be like friends, family of players, people who worked at the club, fans of the team. Like the people who were finding us were all like near enough rugby related. I think I was still playing rugby at the time, so it was loads of like friends of friends and mums and dads of players I was playing with. So it sort of grew quite organically without a lot of work, which we were thankful for. But then it got to that point where I was transitioning out of full-time sport, and I was like, I'm gonna have to actually start taking some decent money from the business, because I was, like I say, I was only contracted something like 20 days initially, which was a big step away from a job that I'd gradually over time built up, salary had gone up and up and up, and other incentives attached to the job and stuff. So to move away from that, not only was it like, I guess, my dream job, it was also something that I was relatively comfortable at that time, and the location where I was living, everything sort of was good. So to step away from that was, I guess, brought about a lot of risk. And I think obviously running a business is hard. You never really quite know how it's going to go, do you, until you've done it. We had that 2 years of building things up alongside. So I think that gave me the faith that it was building without a lot of work and with more time and effort to like push the business a bit more. I was say fairly helpful, but still with my fingers crossed that I could make a go of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then what would your advice be for new grads then that are coming out? Like, what's that the snippets that you would say would be good to do?
I think I sort of mentioned before with my sports thing. I'd certainly try and like test drive the industry, and whether that means like someone does roll in to do their rotations in the NHS because they're really not sure about what they want to do. If it's sport they think they want to do, and I'm probably talking more here to like students. I think you've got a really prime opportunity when you are studying, as busy as it is with placements and uni itself, but to try and get experiences, to try and go shadow someone, just to see what those environments are like, because you learn a lot. And that, I certainly think that 3 weeks I did at the Rhinos, there was certainly loads of stuff that I just didn't probably appreciate or realize went on in that role, like good and bad. It certainly opened my eyes. So I think until you've seen those things, you don't quite really know what they're like. But I would say like there's no perfect path to any job. I don't think anyone can tell you this is the right way to do X, Y, and Z. I think entry into sport, private practice, and NHS all bring different challenges, and they are all very different. So I would say if someone's quite clear about what they want to do, like there's no reason why they can't go after that straight away. And there's certainly ways to do that. There's new grads clearly go straight into private practice or sport. That maybe traditional model that's certainly been there in the past is, I think, slowly sort of waning away, which I think is good for those people that maybe don't want to go down that way really. But I think it's just trying to identify what they want to do if they're unsure, trying to get experiences so they can like test drive those areas out, so they can see what they're like, both the good and the bad, warts and all. But I think the big thing is just having some sort of plan, and then actually having some sort of career, skills, if you like, or just knowledge of how the industry sort of works, because again, that can often change people's like intended path and actual path. Because I think one of the big ones is in sport. Like people don't realize, like a physio post in sport, you might be full time with say an academy team, and some of those roles are £18,000 a year, whereas you roll out as a band 5 physio, you start at 30k. So like some therapists will have this idea of I'm gonna do my rotations. I'm on 30k a year. Progressively goes up. Maybe get a band 6 post, jumps up to 35k. Do that for a few years, but then I'm gonna then transition to sport. But someone who's on like 35k, and at that point maybe they're 3, 4, 5 years qualified, maybe got a mortgage, got a car on finance, got all these other stuff going on, enjoying the holidays, and are they really going to take almost close to a 50% like pay reduction? And in most cases they don't. And I know this from some guys that I trained with who had that plan and then got to that point, and then they've had a kid or they bought a house, and they'll be like, I physically can't do it. Like even if I wanted to, like the jobs that I would potentially get in sport are paying much less than I'm currently getting. There's no way on this earth I could actually make it work. So they've almost then like priced themselves out of a job that they always envisaged and wanted to do, just because of maybe their earlier career decisions. And that's quite an extreme example, but that is certainly something that some people have certainly done. And I think it's a much easier transition for those that do want to get to sport, from sport and into other areas than rather than necessarily the way around.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum in that bit. as well. Yeah. And then just a final question then. So like how do you switch off? Like you reading, I know you're you're a logical type thinker, but like in terms of professional development, is there anything outside of the clinical world that you like to consume?
So obviously you helped me out a little bit with this, but like the injection therapy stuff, something I'm really into at the minute over the last sort of few years. So I've set up like a separate business with that. So that's certainly my baby at the moment. So again, it's been good. Like I mentioned before, with the transition to football, to be like initially when I first started, a complete novice in that area. I've seen a lot of in like injection therapy, like ultrasound stuff and scanning and all sort of stuff. Clearly from time in sport and also private practice, but to actually then be doing it is very different. So I've actually really enjoyed that whole process from being a complete novice, going back to uni and doing a master's module and learning all the like all the background and all the pharmaceutical stuff and how everything works and all the drugs work has been really interesting. Going back to the mentorship, I've had some great help with other people who are further down that track with me as well. But yeah, I've really enjoyed that. So that's probably the bulk of probably my CPD at the moment, and has been maybe over the last sort of 18 months, sort of two years. And then I guess in terms of switching off, I try and train most days, do some sort of activity. That's my main my main thing really. But usually just probably naturally switched off because post work I've got with the three kids at home, particularly eldest with football, rugby. I think we've got pretty much something other than Friday night. We're pretty much scheduled in every night of the week and both days on a weekend. So that keeps me pretty busy and that naturally makes me switch off.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I can imagine it is with that as well. And I think also, like, I think the point you mentioned right at the start about how much you learn from teaching stuff. I've loved compiling the various clips that I've had from these podcasts and putting it into the book and all that. And you do learn so much because you got to feel confident in what you're putting out there.
No, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think one going back to saying about the mentorship and I mentioned Dave O'Sullivan before. One of the best pieces of advice he gave me, and this was literally when I first started, was about teaching. And at the time, he was before he sort of got into the whole teaching world that I guess he's in now. He was writing like guest blogs and things for various different websites. A lot of them actually were based in America. And he said it's one of the best things that I've done, and for the sole reason of like learning things in more detail. And to the point I made earlier on, if you sort of have to understand something in a decent amount of depth to be able to teach it to someone else. So I actually started writing guest blogs when I'd literally just started practicing, and I found it really helpful, more so for my learning than anything else. I think what was putting out at that time wasn't particularly that informative, and I certainly probably wouldn't follow some of the advice I maybe gave myself at that particular time. But it certainly helped me, yeah, and to understand things a bit more. And I was just scratching my own itch really. So I was finding problems, challenges with some of the players I was working with, seeing some injuries I've never even seen before at uni or been spoken about or my placements. So I naturally was having to read into those things anyway. But then it just gave me a bit of a platform or avenue to like compile that information together. So that's certainly one of the best things that I was taught earlier on. And I say something similar to now to new grads, not necessarily to start a website and start making blogs or writing blogs, but even just like engaging with things on like LinkedIn. And it's not necessarily like writing posts or putting stuff out there themselves, but just engaging with some of the other conversations and topics and things they see that other people put out there. And I think then when you start to like read comments or look into things a bit more, it certainly does help your own learning and your development.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that. I think it's really good to be able to. You can only focus on the stuff that you're interested in and putting out there because you're never quite sure what's going to hit. But it's a great way to do it. So look, Andy, really appreciate your time on this. Well done with that because I think it's such a useful tool for people and help them become more acclimatized in the industry. So yeah, well done with that, and thank you for sharing today.
That's all right. Been great to chat.
Brilliant. All right, Andy, have a good one. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.